Okay, I'm back. And every time I sit down to record, I feel like I have little hairs on my face and it drives me insane. Okay. Anyways, I wanted to come on and talk to you about a very different tarot deck. Now, don't worry. For those of you who are following my card comparison series, I'm not going to be adding this deck onto the card comparison series because it doesn't function as a traditional tarot deck does. I mean, it does. We'll get into that. But I'm not going to be adding it into the series because it does deviate enough that you really can't be comparing it to the symbols of, put that down. You can't be comparing it to the symbols that you find in the other decks because you're not always going to be comparing apples to apples. They could actually be kind of going off on a different route and it just wouldn't be a good comparison. So I won't be doing that. So this is a deck that was not a deck that I was looking to purchase. I had looked at this before, and I guess I shouldn't pretend we don't know what we're talking about because it's going to be in the description when you... I was trying to lead up to it, like there's going to be this big reveal or something, but there's actually a title of it right below this video, so there's no point. So we are talking about, so I guess I'll show it and then we'll talk about it some more. So I'm talking about the Chrysalis Tarot, and this is a collaborative deck between the artist Holly Sierra and the author, but there's a little bit more to it than just being the author in terms of this particular deck, which is Tony Brooks. So this is, again, the Chrysalis Tarot. Now, I'll go through all the specifics with the box and everything like that in a minute, but let me just preface it, as I love to preface everything, to say that, as I was just saying, that I really had no intentions of getting this deck. I had looked at the deck a while ago. Well, it's only been out, I want to say, I don't know if it shows it on here in particular, 2014 by US Game Systems. So it hasn't been out all that long. But when it was first leading up to coming out, and not long after it came up, there was a lot of conversation about it, and a lot of hype about, I don't want to say hype, but a lot of excitement being geared up around it. And so I had taken a really close look at it, and I had decided that it wasn't a deck. It's one of those that went on my I'm thinking about it list, and I want to say it might have even made it onto my actual, I'd like to get that. And then I saw a couple reviews after it came out, and I took it off my lists. There were a couple cards in particular that I was like, one including being the Fool. I'm trying to remember the ones that really jumped out at me. I know the Fool for sure. Just made me think, no, it's really not a deck for me. Certain things about it just didn't work to me in terms of tarot. So I thought, well, the art's pretty... it's a little more colorful than a tarot deck that I would particularly want. I just kind of ruled it out. Then I saw an interview, and I'll put a link to it in the description box below. I saw an interview, a YouTube video interview with the author Tony Brooks. And it's quite a long one, and I'm surprised I even clicked on it, to be honest, because again, it wasn't a deck that I was really interested in getting, but for whatever reason, I did click on it and sort of had it running and started to listen to it, and I was just really fascinated by the interview and by him really trying to get across the purpose that he saw of this deck. And you could tell, in my opinion, and again, this is just my opinion, but in my opinion, you could almost sense that there was some frustration. Like, he may have been having to field a lot of negative reactions and or questioning about why he did things the way he did them, because it just seemed like there was a certain level of frustration with traditional terrorists. Sounded terrible. Today, it's one of those days. You could see that there was sort of, I think he felt like there was maybe this camp, with the traditional tarot people, and sort of where he was over here, and that he seems to feel that there's some conflict there. That's the energy that I got from it. But beyond that, it was quite fascinating to see sort of what his purpose and the artist's purpose, because he didn't just come into a deck that was already created, which I think sometimes happens, where maybe there's a painter or an artist that has a vision for a deck, and then she gets somebody to collaborate with her to write up, or him, to write up the guidebooks. Where in this case, the artist, Holly Sierra, approached Tony Brooks because she had read one of his books to do with Arthurian legend, and he seems to be, and before this, he seems to be more of what I would think of as a mythologist, somebody who studies and writes about mythology and things like that. And she had read his book on Arthurian mythology and asked him if he'd be interested in collaborating on a tarot deck. And his response was yes, but that he wouldn't want to just do a traditional reworking or rehashing out of the same things that are already out there, and there's already lots of deck. He would want to do something different. And so apparently what he contributed to the deck was a reworking of who the major archetypes would be for the major arcana. He reworked, what the suits would be, and what the court cards have changed. There's no kings and queens. They're all to do with kind of a troupe of entertainers or troubadours, that he wanted to take it away from that power structure of kings and queens that's just no longer relevant to people today. And so he reworked all that structure, so the base structure of how the deck system was going to work, and then she went through, obviously, and did artwork for the different cards. So it really was more of a collaboration than just an artist and then somebody who wrote up the booklet, I think. So I do think that that's important to point out. And so I really do encourage you, if you're interested in the Chrysalis Tarot, or if you've been interested in the past and been turned off because the different cards, didn't seem to really work with your understanding of a particular card, I would really recommend going and watching this interview, because as soon as I finished listening to it, I thought, oh, I might actually be interested in that particular deck. Like, that really piqued my interest. And then I went back, as I normally do, and I went back and looked at some where I could see all the cards, and I thought, I was at that point because I had pretty much ticked my boxes off and I need to eventually do, why I got what decks that I got sort of video, which I kind of did at the beginning of the very first video of the card comparison series, but I have added other ones since then. But I generally do have, like, okay, I have this deck and this deck, but I could use, questions come up where I don't feel like the decks that I have really quite, and let me just say that I do believe that all you need in order to read tarot, whether for yourself or professionally, is yourself and a deck of cards. One deck of cards that you work with well. That's all you need. You don't need them. There's many people who are like that. And I can honestly say that because for many years, 9 years, I worked off of one deck of cards, and then I added the Shadowscape deck, and I really worked just off the Shadowscape deck for over a year before I started really adding in. When I did start to do professional readings online, that's when I started to expand my deck collection, both because I wanted a number of decks to be able to pull from, just depending on what the type of question is or the situation that was going on, or to be able to do reviews and things, that are quite interesting. So I did want to have a grouping of decks that I could draw from, but I wanted them to be decks that I really worked with. And the only two that didn't fall in that category, actually I take that back. The only one, no, there's two. The only two that didn't fall into that very specific category was the Paulina Tarot, which I purchased before I started reading online professionally. I just thought that that was similar to the Shadowscape deck and just grabbed it. And it's actually would be the only deck of mine that I have fairly mixed feelings about, as well as the Steampunk Tarot, which I literally purchased just because I liked the artwork. I liked the steampunk genre, and I was in a bookstore and I bought it on a whim. And I love the deck, and I'm glad that I have it. It's not one that I generally pull out for readings for clients, though. It doesn't tend to call out to be used for readings, at least as of yet. But other than that, like you really do specifically did pick decks that fulfilled a certain area that I felt was personally wanted. I don't think there's any need. Past the first deck, I don't think there's any need, but I particularly wanted to have access to. And this last one that I had purchased was the Handle Tarot, which is a very deep deck, and I bought it actually for study of I Ching with tarot, for study of runes with tarot, and for study with very basic study of Kabbalah. It really mostly just working with the actual letters that are on the handle thing. So it was more intended to be a study deck, and I have a fly driving around. There's a fly driving around, driving me crazy. And I ended up, it's actually shown up in quite a few, I've had quite a few readings where it's really been use me kind of feeling. I've actually used it to quite a beautiful conclusion with client readings, which I wasn't really expecting. And so, but I think that because, I have kind of done all these specific things, and then I did have in my head, I kind of looked over what I had and what I used, because I've always been quite interested in mythology, folk tales, fairy tales. I've said it in other videos that I've done. My degree is in literature and writing. My master's, almost all of my masters, except for one. I'm one of those people with one class and a thesis left because life just got in the way. Is to do with literature, with a great focus on fairy tales, folklore, monster theory. But my thesis is, well, what I have done of my thesis is on Frankenstein and Angela Carter's Nights at the Circus. Anyways, way off topic. The point is that the issues of folklore and mythology and the way that those inform us today in terms of the collective unconscious is very much of interest to me. And that is very much what informs this particular deck, as the archetypes that he chose for the major arcana are various archetypes across different cultures, and they purposefully try to really balance the energy between male and female energy. So it feels like very often, even in the decks that I have, very often you have a very female oriented, very the divine feminine feel to a deck. Druidcraft, I feel, is fairly balanced, but this, they specifically were trying to keep the male and female energies to be quite balanced, and just the mythological folklore undertones to the deck are very much in keeping with something that I would particularly like, as well as the strong message that we need to connect with the collective unconscious in order for us to move along our own particular personal path. And to be honest, really at the moment, because I have been working with, since I got it, the Handle Tarot quite closely, and doing quite a lot of readings with it, which I had not really intended to do readings with it, but it's kind of popped up as working quite beautifully even for client readings, which I wasn't expecting. But it's a very deep and beautiful deck, and I just, when I saw, kind of flipped through the images again for the Chrysalis Tarot, the child in me sort of popped out. That child, I was one of those people who, even today, I have a beautiful coloring book. I have a box of crayons and markers. And all growing up through high school, I always kept coloring books. Just, and in a sense, it's sort of a meditative, um, relaxing thing. And my daughter's the same way. She's 23 and is thrilled to get Disney Princess coloring book from me. That's sort of how we are. And so when I looked at the images again, that sense of the child in me, um, just really wanted to come out and play. Um, and so did the storyteller. That is what, before I started really focusing on tarot, I mean, that's what I do. Myself at its most creative and its most at home is in the process of storytelling through writing. And so for me, reading tarot is an extension of that. It's an extension of telling stories, because all stories for me are about getting at the truth. And so for me, tarot reading is just telling personal stories, helping individuals and myself, to get at their particular truth through the story of tarot. So for me, it was just like kind of hitting a playground. So I thought, you know what, why not? I did get the tarot app first, or the tarot app. Yeah, it's tarot app. I did get the app for my phone, before I actually placed the order, so I could really look at each one. And one of the things I was kind of, let me pull it up really quick here, if I can see it. One of the things I was kind of disappointed by is, if you look at the actual, which is very hard to see with this bright light. Hopefully I can tone it down and you'll be able to see it better. But the image on, and if not, I'll put a picture. But the image on the tarot app is borderless. It's basically how I love tarot cards, and they're stunning. And so then I thought, oh, maybe there's actually an option with this deck, for a borderless deck, but there's not. And I don't think it's one that I would trim, because it would mess up the back probably significantly. But I do really love these borderless images that are on the tarot app. So I did go with that, and I did go through, and I was like, oh, and it just woke up that child that wants to come out and play with something pretty and colorful. There are a couple cards. Well, let me first say it's a standard box. It is a fairly good, quality, but it's a cardboard box. It has the image on the front of it. The back of it has the page of mirrors, which would be the cups, traditionally, and the page of mirrors is named as the healer, which is so pretty. So that's the box. It's nice. It would hold the cards perfectly fine, but it's nothing. It's not thick, heavy duty cardboard or anything. It does come with a little white book, a bigger little white. It comes with a little white book that's the size of the cards themselves. And so in the little white book, I don't want to say, there's an introduction, and then it goes right into the card meanings. There are no images or anything. It just has the name of the card. So for this one is the Ravens. It tells you what the traditional title would be, which would be the Magician. It gives its attributes for this, Synchronicity and Messenger, and then it gives a couple paragraphs of meaning. And the author does have a very extensive blog, which I will put a link to in the description box below, where and on the side there has a listing of all the cards, and you can click on them to get at any post in which he's written, and he has gone into extensive more extensive detail with the cards. And apparently there is a book that's going to be coming out which basically will be maybe a dissemination of that blog, but in print form and obviously organized and everything, to go over it. But his intention, if you watch the video, is that these things are supposed to bring us out to play, so to speak. And he really didn't want a lot of meaning to get in the way um, of our own intuition. The whole point of the deck was to let sort of free our minds from the knowledge, all the knowledge that we've accumulated, and let our intuition come out and play and really tap into the collective unconscious and come at reading from that direction versus the information that we've accumulated. So his intention was not to write a bigger book, because that's for us to do, with the deck itself. And he even talks about, actually it's on the front of this card, which I think is the Four of Spirals, which is would be equivalent of wands. That he talks about this card, which apparently is Holly Sierra's favorite card in the deck. And I will put a scan of the card in so that you can see up close, because you won't be able to see from here. But this card is that it's got a little thatched cottage in it, and at the door of the cottage is a broom. And sort of the point of this card and the point of this deck is to sort of take that broom and sweep out everything that you thought you knew, or that you did know, or that you thought you knew, and come at things fresh. Come at things with a fresh perspective, and more importantly, tap into all these mythologies and archetypes that are so strong in our collective unconscious, and be able to use those to go further down your own path. So that's kind of the point. So that we see that on the front of this booklet. The backs of the cards are, let's see, it comes with 2 little extra cards. So we have the Chrysalis Tarot, by painting by Holly Sierra, written by Tony Brooks, published by U.S. Game Systems, with the Wheel of Fortune card, which I think is called just the Wheel. I don't know, we'll look at it. So we have that, and then we also have a little bit about, a card that has information about Holly Sierra and about Tony Brooks on it. And the backs of the cards are stunning. I mean, they really are beautiful. And it would stop me from trimming the deck, because, if you trimmed into it, you're going to cut into the wings. And it is a beautiful backing. It is reversible. Does the book, I'm trying to think. The book, I don't think, goes into reversals. No, it doesn't offer reversals, but you could certainly read with it, because the back is reversals. And they're beautiful. They're colorful and they're beautiful. One thing that I will say right off the bat is that when I looked at images online, and when I looked at the tarot app with all the images, the colors are very bright, very jewel toned, very beautiful. For me, slightly maybe too much so. I will say that in person, the cards are not as bright as some of these scans that I've seen online, and certainly not as bright. And I will try to get a good picture of maybe a card with the tarot app next to its actual card, and see if I can get it to turn out enough so that you can see. If so, I'll put that here. But it's definitely not as bright of color in person, which for me was a plus. They're still very rich and they're still quite beautiful, but there is a much, even the background, the edging, which is sort of a gold edging around them, which seems very gold in any of the gold that you see in the tarot app, which could be also phone to phone depending on your settings on your phone. But in the tarot app, and even a lot of the scans, seem very, very gold. And in person, it's much more, and still definitely gold, but it's much more of an antiqued, quite beautiful gold. It's, to me, not a jarring, the colors, as rich and beautiful as they are not at all jarring in person. So I'm going to go ahead and switch. My hair is going crazy today. I'm going to go ahead and switch so that you can see the cards better. You know, I've tried to kind of go through and flip this way, which is great if I'm just going over a couple, but if you want to see them all, I don't think it's the best way for you to be able to see them. I will just say real quick, because this, one of the main cards that I found to be quite problematic was the very first card, or the 0 card, which is the Fool. And you'll see that they have obviously the card image. It has a very thin border, so the border is not terrible whatsoever. It has the name of the card, and then it has the traditional meaning, or the traditional title of the card. So for this, actually they changed this. So this is actually 0, the hero, which would be the Fool. Most of these are the traditional names, although I guess we'll see when we go through them one by one. Some of them have been changed. So this to me was one of the more problematic cards, because I did not see, initially when I saw this, I'm like, Merlin as the Fool, like Merlin is sort of a fully realized person who is powerful in his magic. You know, it's not even showing like a young Merlin, like this is an old, this is an old Merlin, you know, this is a magician in his full power. This isn't even a young, you know, that would have made sense to me at first, you know, just a young Merlin just starting out on his pathway. But it's not. It's actually, you know, an older Merlin. And I thought, that just, how does that work with a Fool? And I could get on board with it a little bit, because my idea of Merlin tends to be a lot more, you know, in the Steampunk Tarot, the Fool card for me is Bert from Mary Poppins. You'll have to look at that card comparison. I go into it, but it's Bert from Mary Poppins, and it works so wonderfully as a Fool, because he has that innocence, and he approaches life from, his power is that he approaches life with that just openness that I find absolutely stunning as the Fool card. And I do get that sense with Merlin. Now, Bert doesn't have any magic of his own. He, you know, only experiences magic through Mary Poppins, but he does have his own power and his own strength in his ability to face the world with a beautiful openness that's just stunning. And I do have my idea of Merlin does include that sense of play, that sense of childlike wonder that Merlin, even as old Merlin, approaches the world from. And in one of the books that I love, that's in my video on the books that have really influenced me spiritually, The Way of Weird, and it's been so long since I've reread that I don't really want to commit too much information, because I could get it wrong, but the sorcerer that's in that has that same sense. He was a very powerful shamanic person, but his approach to the world was just so wide open that it was sort of that childlike thing. So I could kind of get on board, but as a traditional Fool, I just didn't see it. Now they approach this a little bit differently, as somebody who is going to help us along on our journey. Sort of each of the major arcana cards are archetypes that are going to help us along and sort of be our guides for a particular part of the way. And so in that role, you know, Merlin does work. And they do rename it. It's not the Fool here. It is the hero. Even as the hero, you don't think of Merlin as the hero. You know, he's the one that helps King Arthur, who is the hero. So even that is a different take on it. But once you really get into the dynamics of the deck, this does work. And this is certainly one of those decks, like the image I showed you on the front of the little white book, that we have to sort of let go of our traditional view of each of these numbered cards and just approach them open, just like I was talking about with Bert. You know, just approach it with kind of childlike wonder and play with it, and tap into these images and these archetypes and enjoy it. So anyways, I just kind of wanted to show you that because it was the first one, and that was one of the cards that I found quite problematic in the deck before. So I'm going to go ahead and switch now so that you can actually see the cards up close.